Episode 35 of Dark Academia Queen. Today, we're going to be talking about ghost superstitions, where did it originate from, and how did this come about? And why is this playing the Dark Academia? Well, if you know, Ghost is like one of the many elements of the Dark Academia genre. But before I really dive into that, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications, and also please subscribe, help a girl out. I would love to be able to do this full time, but you know, sometimes life happens. Just gotta roll with the punches. So I do these in my spare time. But ghosts have been around for a long time. I am an avid believer in ghosts and the paranormal. I wouldn't my house if someone died in, if I'm being honest. But then again, you gotta really stop and think. The older the house, the higher the chance someone died in the house. So let's keep that in mind. But here is a concise history of ghosts and some famous accounts of them. So, But so for as long as humans have been aware, it seems to have they have been aware of ghosts and the concept of ghosts. And ghost stories date back far into human history and have captivated and mystified the human race for generations. A rustle of bushes, and the sounds of something creaking, and anxiety entwined in our instinct to survive that make us feel something that we may not know about. Also, the human belief that something beyond death could exist. So let's define what is a ghost. We understand a ghost as today as roots and myths in the beliefs in ancient cultures. Ghosts were sometimes still believed to be a spirit of a person or an animal that exists after the body has died. It is partly because of the belief that many funeral rituals initiate initially took place and were practiced and to prevent existing spirits from remaining on Earth and go hunting and living. So, further to this, the existence of ghosts is often believed because of the human experience and the feeling haunted in the presence of a spirit. And this can range from hearing, seeing, feeling strange, or unexplainable spooky happenings. For example, an inanimate object that can be that moves freely to its own accord and is often cited caused by a ghost. So I remember this one time I was at this working at Top Hat Barbecue in Hayden, Alabama, and I was opening. So it was just me that morning. So I was opening, and me and Cindy. So I had gone to go to the back for something, and I come back and Cindy tells me that there was a speaker there, but there was someone through. I heard nobody was there. And keep in mind, we were only two in the building. Let's clarify. I was already in the back. There was also a belief that Barry once told me that he was doing a dishes and stuff, and he looked back. There was a man in a top hat just watching him. He tilted his head, and he would go back doing dishes. And next thing he knows, he turns back. That man is gone. I am an avid believer, so you it takes a lot to convince me that they don't exist. But ghost stories are anything of a contemporary phenomenon, and they have passed from generations and generations of centuries, either orally and through the written world. Ancient cultures believed that the human experience of soul and spirit continue to exist when the physical body did not and lived in another form, often existing in the afterlife, and therefore the experience of ghosts in the living world was a traumatic and disturbing thought. And the only reason that would come across in the living world was because of a traumatic event or unfurnished business, and it's believed that this usually occurred due to an improper burial, injustice, or need for a death to be um, avenged as well, and a truly unpleasant experience for the living. Now, these stories can be told in ancient culture across the world from Japan to Ireland, and Orestia is a trilogy of Greek tragedies that was forced to form in 458 BC, and it told the story of murder, revenge, and justice. Widely regarded as Achilles' finest work, the trilogies feature a character of named Semestras, a ghost who seeks justice for the son who murdered her. And this is the first appearance of a ghost featured in literature and typically in ancient Greek beliefs, after life and death crossing over the spirits from the world of the living. So, an example of this is Pliny the Younger. So, moving into the rule of the Roman Empire, it held it after statements Pliny the Younger recounted in his famous ghost story around 100 AD, providing that these chilling stories have been a commonplace at least for 200 years. Pliny's stories also tell the ghostly story of a long beard and rattling chains haunting a large house in Athens. Despite being told thousands of years ago, the story has held the key to the ingredients of classic ghost stories: restless spirits, unexplained noises, and chilling nightmares. I have actually talked about some ghost stories, some haunted places on previous episodes. I also plan on doing that more of my Down the Rabbit Hole podcast as well. But in the modern Western world, we understand that the ghosts are typically associated with unfinished business. As mentioned as Pliny tells, the ghost that rattled the chains was not at peace until its corpse was discovered and given a proper burial. The Romans had many beliefs about ghosts, and while it can't be stated that they all believed them, it is said that that the ghost stories were popular, and the Romans believed in the ghost stories of the ghost. Pliny's ghosts fall into the first category, known as lemure. Um, and this is their angry spirits and haunt troubled living, yet they were still honored with a series of their annual feast days. In the contrast to the Lemure, the Manes were ghosts that guided and protected their close relatives, often referring to the gods and Manes, were celebrated in Parentalia and festival, and it is where it is believed to have been existed under the earth. Now, to also understand the mains, to please the mains, the Romans would make an offering, leaving to food and drinks at their grave. And a great example is this is Lucian of Samosata. In ancient satires, Lucian of Samosata formalized the disbelief in ghosts with the novel The Lover of Lies, which was born in 120 AD. And Lucian was an erudite man with a unique sense of humor, and used this unique skill to mock his contemporaries. A staunch believer in logic and common sense, Lucian's novel The Lover of Lies ridicules those who believed in anything remotely supernatural. In the tale, Lucian tells this character Democritus, who lived in the tomb of the city gates, solely to prove that cemeteries were not haunted by ghosts. He notes that the younger local man tried to frighten him, dissed him in black robes and skull mask, but despite these practical jokes, he refused to believe in the supernatural. And while Lucian may have been a firm disbeliever, it is interesting to note that the difference in the classical idea of a ghost appearance and one it still stands today. Now, famous ghosts in literature can be William Shakespeare's Hamlet is a fine example of this. And Shakespeare was fearless in his pursuit to make them integral in his plays. While he was certainly not the only dramatist to feature ghosts in his plays, his ghost differs from the importance of their interaction with the living. The earliest Shakespeare play that would introduce ghosts is Richard III, in which is the Eponymous character, and it is visited by a character in his spirits. Also, Hamlet's ghost is another example of this. These ghosts would taunt Richard with tales of their demise and to predict their that he will suffer defeat next year. It seems to the audience that the ghost has appeared to Richard in his dreams, and thus cementing the relationship between the ghost and the nightmares. However, when performed on stage, The ghosts are physically present while the actors made up the classical ghostly representation. White in skin and undead appearance. Ghost's treatment of now his treatment of ghosts, Shakespeare's treatment of the ghost, were used as key to storytelling as illustrated in reverse play like Macbeth. And a wholly non-traditional man in the ghost of Banquo appears only to Macbeth and is invisible to all the other guests. Shakespeare employs the ghost to convey that the burden of Banquo's murder lies solely on Macbeth. Written between 1599 and 1602, Hamlet is one of literature's most famous ghost stories and is centered around Hamlet's desire to seek justice. And his father's murder, and the play is considered one of the most powerful literary works of all time. Fundamental to the plot is the ghost of Hamlet's late father, and referred to as the stage directions as Ghost. The ghost appears just 3 times in the play, acting as a catalyst for his actions. Now, his depiction of ghosts is widely in line with ancient ghost stories, and that it symbolizes and communicates unsolved crimes and injustice, and the ghost seeks revenge in order to release from purgatory. It's also worth noting that the most debate amongst academics and dramatists is whether the ghost is really a representation of the deceased king or a figment of young Hamlet's imagination, but once Shakespeare has used the concept of ghost to drive the entire narrative. Now, the existence of ghosts reveals as much about the inner works and the living characters as it does about the deceased king. Another example of this is Marley's ghost as well. Now, moving through Shakespeare years and beyond, ghosts became a literary genre of their own in the Victorian era. Charles Dickens is a great example of this. He was usually influential in establishing the popularity of the ghost stories. From David Copperfield to Oliver Twist, he created the most fictional characters of all time. In 1843, he wrote the most famous ghost story of all time. Can we guess it? Can we guess it? Can we guess it? We see it at Christmas every year. That's right, A Christmas Carol. And it follows Ebenezer Scrooge from a miserly money lender to a kind and loving man. Told in five chapters, um, or staves, as Dickens would call them, Scrooge was visited by 4 spirits on Christmas Eve, each of whom who opened his mind up to their world. The first one was a ghost of his former business partner, Jacob Marley, which was depicted in heavy chains and dragged in money boxes. He also seeks to show him his fate if he does not change. He is also visited by 3 spirits, the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, in which we see this all the time, like in many shows where they do this, like in Christmas specials, I noticed. Now, and for all whom has trusted him to curse to bear the burdens of his chains. Like Shakespeare's Ghost of Banquo, Dickens' ghost appears to solely a Scrooge, ranging from eerie childlike man to a phantom-like ghost of Christmas future. Dickens himself had a personal interest in ghosts, and his friend and the biographer John Forster noting that he could easily have become entirely consumed by the supernatural, for he had not restrained by his own common sense. He also remembered being told terrifying ghost stories by his nanny, Miss Mercy, at bedtime, and he devoured ghost stories as a teenager and took pleasure in scaring himself into the core. As he moved into adult, he became more skeptic, but his imagination was well and truly ignited by ghostly childhood fascinations, taking place over one evening with a simple logic structure. The Christmas Carol illustrates how ghost stories work best in short story undeveloped format. Now, this is usually a popular and the most among common with the ghost stories of today. They're short and brief. Um, stories have such as these stories can easily be recounted orally. And as many of the most terrifying ghost stories are, thus bringing us to the end of a concise look at the origins of the ghost stories. A fascinating story can be one that raises interesting points and tells us more about where we live and our lives and thoughts of living more than dead. Now I know so I work at two places. One, I work at Marinas and I work at Oflo, which are both in Murfreesboro, which is in the Nashville area. Both are older buildings, so of course there's like ghost stories and stuff and everything. And I remember Marinas is rumored, not Marinas, Oflo is rumored to be haunted. Apparently, it used to be like there's two boys that haunt it and everything, and I'm like, really, and everything. So, but it's just a little side bit. It's but there's a lot of ghost tunnels and stuff under Murfreesboro. I do recommend going to see it if you're ever out this way.